Hey guys, this is the Hard Time Strong Men podcast, cheering up a better class of man. And today is our second installment in our skill tree series, which we're going to be talking about our trunk of our tree, which is Fieldcraft. So, in our previous episode, we talked about the roots of our tree. So, physically strong, mentally tough, and morally straight. This week, we're talking about the trunk of our tree, the body of our tree, which is Fieldcraft, because Fieldcraft permeates into everything that we do, everything that we want to teach you guys in some way, in some measure. So when you look up Fieldcraft in the Oxford Dictionary, you get the techniques involved in living, traveling, or making military or scientific observations in the field, especially while remaining undetected. So in my research for this project, for this episode, I also found a military definition of Fieldcraft, which I found in ATP 4-32.3, the EOD Company Platoon Team Operations Manual. And funny enough, but
so weird.
They're I just don't know how that's the only definition I found on all of Army pubs.
Right.
Anyway,
Because
so
why would they ever use Fieldcraft at all? Like, they're fobbits. Like, come on.
well, it's like I thought I would have found it in
The infantry.
like infantry platoon,
Yeah.
squad, special operations, anything, or like long range reconnaissance, any other field manual. But here we are. So their definition is Fieldcraft is the tactical skill to operate stealthily and the methods used to do so, which can differ during day and night operations and changes due to weather and terrain. A soldier's Fieldcraft is strengthened through the soldier's discipline. Now, when we break down the word Fieldcraft, so the roots of Fieldcraft, field and craft. So field, just going through several definitions I came up with, an area of land. In craft, in the context of the way we're using this word, is skill and experience in a trade or occupation. So skill and experience in an area of land or an occupation that you're working out of an area of land. So working in the land, that is Fieldcraft. So for us, for Hard Time Strong Men, our definition that we came up with is the skill set required and the methods used to live and operate in a field environment. So,
I mean, that's pretty
shooting,
broad, but
moving, communicating.
Yeah.
It's a catch-all, but it needs to be, because the context that we're going to be talking about Fieldcraft, that we're going to be teaching about it, changes for so many people. Not everyone is going to be conducting military or soldiering tasks in the field. Some people may be hunters. Some people may be using Fieldcraft as search and rescue. There are, so many different possibilities. So that's kind of where we land on that definition.
It's our 80% solution.
80% solution, exactly. So I guess we can dig into a little bit of what Fieldcraft is. So why did we give such a broad definition? What are we trying to catch here?
I mean, it's just because it encompasses everything. Fieldcraft just isn't just about, making a fire, the 4 pillars of survival. It encompasses, living in the field, moving in the field, operating in the field, adapting to the environment. It's all about having a broad skill set that would allow you to function if there was no society, there was no supermarkets, there was no electrical grid, that kind of thing.
Well, we tend to joke about like the 12-year-old in the 1800s, right? But fieldcrafting to him was just living in the field, because that's where he lived.
It was life.
Like you had no infrastructure, you had nothing. So, not just a working or like a kinesthetic, like a working knowledge of fieldcraft, but just the head knowledge. So, knowing plants, knowing wildlife, knowing, the cycles of the weather, knowing terrain, being able to connect those dots is a huge part of fieldcraft. knowing what to do when you see something. So being able to make those, accurate heuristics, those accurate, guesses, and be able to move ahead in those processes. So, especially when you're like tracking, game, or if you're looking for water or anything.
Yeah, it's funny too how like you said, even a 12-year-old back in 250 years ago would know all these things. While we were in the army, there was actually specific jobs for those individual things. So knowledge of plants, wildlife, that may encompass the medical, the weather. We actually had combat. Oh God, what were they called? They were like combat. Um,
Was it like weather
yeah,
control
they were
or
like
something?
weather controllers. It was actually the Air Force that really used those. But then terrain, we would have um, like the map guys. Like we would get our maps from them. But think back to like 250 years ago, that was just common knowledge. Like 12-year-olds had this skill set like innately. They grew up with this stuff from the time that they were essentially born, and we've gotten away from
Well,
that.
I mean, think about when there were no, upkept roads
Right.
or any, really defined roads. So if you're just going by carriage, and then you have the mud season come through, your road, your road's gone.
Right.
So if you don't know how to navigate to the next town, then there goes your trade.
Right.
Or if you don't know how to navigate to your river or a source of water, I mean,
You had to be an expert in land
the,
navigation.
yeah, I mean, this was all just second nature stuff. It was an
Hmm.
implied task, you know, which a lot of, part of our definition is, a lot of fieldcraft is implied tasks.
Right.
So, living, operating, moving in a field environment. So you need to have noise discipline. You need to keep light discipline. The concept, the tenet of leave no trace, being able to utilize camouflage, knowing the difference between cover and concealment, talking about living, surviving in the field. So the four pillars of survival: water, shelter, fire, food. You need to have those on lock.
Mm.
Like you just said, water navigation, if you're by large bodies of water navigation, if you have that capability, right? And then depending on the context that you're in, or saying like a military, or you know hunting, search and rescue, any of those contexts, being able to accurately or effectively observe and accurately report information
Right.
is huge.
This week's episode is brought to you by FieldSeats.com. FieldSeats.com is an e-commerce federally licensed firearm dealer. They provide virtual reviews on brand new firearms, optics, and gear, where at the end of the review, they give away the item being reviewed to an attendee. Currently, they've got reviews up ranging from $25 for a brand new Trigicon RMR Type 2 adjustable LED red dot sight to $65 for a new Springfield M1A Precision 308. Each review has limited seating, so your chances of winning the giveaway are that much higher. Check out fieldseats.com to purchase your reviews and enter to win the item being reviewed. Use code STRONGMEN to get 10% off your order. Be sure to also check out their Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at field_seats for updates on products and other tips and info. Use code STRONGMEN to receive 10% off your entire purchase at fieldseats.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about the folks that were growing up on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so even if you had travelers come through, there was no guarantee that those were good people.
Right.
That's where you had people banding together, in their communities to take care of one another. But there was no telling. Like you said, there's different bands and sects of whatever people that are there, whatever people who are moving through. But you had to add street smarts too. It all rolls together.
Right. And, being able to like effectively observe, you don't want a freaking grizzly bear rolling up on you, or wolves sneaking up on you, or coyotes getting your livestock, or, bobcats kind of creeping up on you. Like, it's.
Oh my gosh, man. So I don't know if you remember I think it was like the first season of Alone, where they dropped this guy off on the beach and he had to quit the first day because they dropped him off in a freaking bear den.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was trying to find adequate shelter. He's like looking around. He sees scat. He sees like bear sign on the on
Yeah,
freaking tree
everywhere.
trunks,
Yeah,
and then he looks up, and there's freaking a mama and her cubs in the
in the
trees.
tree. Yep.
And it's like, goodness. And so he, beat it out of there. He was able to make a hasty shelter, but then he hears them, and you see game, the game cameras, outside of his tent, and you just see that mama bear just like creeping around. It's like, if he didn't know bear sign, if he didn't just have that prior knowledge, I mean,
Oh, you screwed.
imagine going up to that bear den and be like, oh man, this is a really great shelter.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think there was another year where a chick got dropped off and she got hunted by wolves.
oh my gosh, for real.
Yeah, I think there was one of those seasons. It was one of the later ones, I believe.
I think one of my favorite episodes or favorite guys in that show was the dude who got dropped off, and he was showing just all the camera equipment that they have to like truck around that you don't see obviously throughout the show. But he's doing that, and he's like, oh, there's a squirrel. He sees a squirrel in a tree. He picks up a freaking rock. I think he threw it. He missed the first one, picked up another rock, killed the squirrel, and he
That's
harvests the squirrel for meat first day. And it's like, you'll never freaking do that again. But the guy was able to, effectively adapt to the tools that were at his disposal,
right.
and he got food.
Yeah, and honestly, like with that in mind too, that reminds me of some of the issues some of those contestants were running into was diseases in those animals.
Yes.
So that's another thing you have to keep in mind is like you got to know what kind of diseases you could be facing by killing and eating some of these like game animals. And not only that, but you have
Right.
to know how to treat a variety of illnesses too with just what's around you.
Right.
So that plays back into the knowledge of plants and wildlife. But I mean, the diseases thing is kind of like it's kind of out there, man, because not a lot of people have that knowledge unless you're in the medical field or you've done a lot of fieldcraft to kind of like you have that experience where you know what diseases you may encounter and how to counteract that.
Right. It takes, yeah.
Because it's
I mean,
more
it
than
takes the
just,
hours.
hey, there could be something in the water. I have to boil this or filter it. It's more like, what kind of diseases are specific to these animals and what kind of problems could they cause me if I ingest
Well,
them?
and what does that look like in the animal?
Yes.
If it's presenting in the animal in this way, I think it was the last season where they were in Alaska, like season 8. And towards the end, one of the final two contestants, she got a porcupine and she skinned it, and there were just abscesses all over
Oh,
its pelt. And it's like,
ugh.
and she said, this is obviously diseased, but I don't have anything else. And somehow she didn't get sick. But, it makes me think too of, just being able to collect and purify water, collect pure drinking water. There was one guy, and his method of collecting water, because he couldn't make a fire to save his life, was he ran the water he collected over moss
Mm-hmm.
on a rock, and he collected the bottom, thinking that that would adequately purify it. That guy went home with probably dysentery. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, obviously it didn't work,
he was
but
puking his guts out. He was, he had diarrhea, so made himself more dehydrated. But that's fieldcraft. Knowing that you can't just run some water over moss and expect it to be, clean to drink.
right.
So, yeah, being able to live, so food, water, shelter, fire, being able to operate, having your noise and light discipline, using cover and concealment, having good camouflage, not silhouetting yourself on, on a skyline,
Yep.
being able to observe and report. So anything that your job is, being able to do that in the field, with or without support, with or without infrastructure, that is all fieldcraft.
Yeah. And honestly, like it's not just the tactical side. Because like we mentioned this stuff just because I mean, you're hiding from animals too. Like whether you're hunting them or being hunted by them, you still need to be able to disappear from view of them. Like whatever route you're taking, whether it is hunting or being hunted, like you still need to be able to have noise discipline, light discipline, not leave tracks, have camouflage, be able to survive with 4 pillars of survival and still be able to like navigate your way around, whether it's on land or on water, and be able to accurately and effectively observe and report on what you're actually seeing. So if you're not alone, others know exactly what's going on too. So this all plays
Right.
into Fieldcraft as a whole, and it doesn't have just survival, just hunting, or just tactical to do with it.
Right. So, some examples of people who were excellent in their fieldcraft. So, the Native Americans, who, in large part were nomadic, being able to live completely off of the land.
Right. They were the
in whatever area that they moved to.
right, and they were the premier fieldcraft experts. I mean, they made their own medicine in the field. They hunted, they lived, they survived.
Well, you just said they lived their life, their entire lives were in the field.
Right.
So huge. The frontiersmen.
Yep.
The Rhodesian scouts, professional hunters, guides, cowboys, trackers, search and rescue teams. All of these people who primarily work, quote unquote, operate in the field, this is their bread and butter. This is their skill set. Think about the wildland firefighters.
Oh, God,
being able to read and navigate terrain, whether or not you have, good visual, a good visual of that terrain, due to smoke or anything else. Being able to move, up and down mountains, over ravines, through like falling timber, everything, so having the footwork and the physical capacity to do that. That's fieldcraft.
It's also crazy too, because those guys could actually read fire. Like they could read and understand what fire was doing and what it was going to do. Like that amazes me.
Well, being able to anticipate and to see, most likely and most dangerous courses of action, and being able to react accordingly, or preemptively act, through that thought process.
Right.
Crazy skill set, huge. Okay, guys, I know this was a short episode, but this was our introduction, our definition for fieldcraft. So this is the trunk of our tree. This is what everything branches off of. So this was made to be more of a catch-all, but fieldcraft is incredibly important because none of these skills that we're going to be talking about, none of these skill sets that we're going to be digging into matter. You can't use them if you don't have, if your fieldcraft isn't squared away. So with that being said, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you guys. We hope you got a lot from this, and we're excited to bring more to you in the future. As always, we're the Hard Time Strongmen podcast, training up a better class of man. Stay in the fight.